All right, let's hope this is working. This is the next step to getting your practice piece to look like your practice image. So you should have all of your basic shapes drawn now. We're going to work a little bit more on detail, and then we're going to add some shading and texture. So some basic details are in here. Steps for adding details. The number one and best step is to divide a box in half and in half here. Divide that same box in half and in half here, and helps you place your details. So this was kind of confusing where this flower went. Once I divided it in half, I knew it went almost exactly halfway over in this box. So I could draw it there. Another detail that's tough to draw are words. So it's really tough to see, and I did this one, but it didn't record. So I'm going to do this again. So I've got a word here. I'm going to draw a box around this word. All right, what I'm going to do after I draw this box around the word, and I'm going to draw it in a color so you can see it better. After I draw a box around this word, I'm going to draw that same shape, that same box in my practice piece. So it's in C and D, 4 C and D. Goes through this intersection here, comes down 2/3 of the way. When it crosses, it's a little less than halfway. Comes down at an angle. Okay, now I have the same shape here as I have here. Then I'm going to do one more thing before I draw. I'm going to divide that in two boxes. So here I have 2 letters fit on the left side and 3 letters fit on the right side. So again, I'm going to draw that same box here. Divide that up. So I have I think a P and an E that fit inside here. Nice and big kind of bubble letters. I can't even read what this says, so I'm going to make it up as I go. The next letter is right on this guideline in between C and D. And then the last one fits in here. So that helped guide me and fit my details in the right spot. When I'm done with that, I can then erase that box. Hopefully in class you will get to experiment with one of these erasers. The back of a pencil eraser will work, but these are really nice for erasing in small areas. I don't have enough for everyone, so we'll see how that goes. So I can erase the box, my guide box that I used here. So after I have all of my basic shapes and enough of my details, what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase my grid lines. I'm going to pause that and do that real quick. Okay, we're back. So grid lines are erased. So it's important that you draw those grid lines nice and lightly. They'll erase a lot easier. I'm going to start adding some value in here. I'm going to use my darker pencils, my 4B and my 6B. I'll start with my 4B inside here. Now, the way this looks, it looks like it's kind of a dark area with little white dots. So I might have to simplify this a little bit and pretend my toilet paper has a little less texture than it really does. Or what I could do is I could shade this in with kind of some cross-hatching lines to kind of go back and create those little white areas. So everything has a value here. I don't think there's much that's bright white, even though it's toilet paper that is white. Our goal is to make our drawing look exactly like this. You're going to use a couple different tools to help you get there. So there's that eraser pen. There's also a value scale. There's also blending tools. Alright, so this is what a value scale looks like, and what I can do is I can hold this next to my toilet paper, and I can use that squint test I talked about before, blur my eyes like I need glasses, and I find that this value is the closest match to here. Oh, it's a little too light. This one looks pretty good. So what I need to do is take this value here, value 7, come down here, and my toilet paper has to be that dark. You can see I have a long way to go. I'm going to keep using this kind of cross-hatching technique because I think that's going to work to make those dots. I just need more of it. I start to lose some of my detail with these flowers, so I'm going to go back and darken some of this up. I'm still working with my 4B pencil here. Dark and soft, but not too soft. All right, another tool you'll get to use in class is a blending tool. So there's a couple different kinds made out of paper over there on the bin. What you're going to use these for is when you have value already laid down, you can use this to spread that value out and flatten things a bit. This works well for areas that are really smooth. I'm not going to use much of this because the value here in my toilet paper isn't smooth. It's varied. There's dark and light spots, and I want to be able to see that. That's why I'm drawing those cross-hatching lines instead of really smooth flat lines. So I'm going to check my value scale again. We determined this was a 7 before. I'm going to come down here, and I'm closer, but I still could go darker. I'm going to keep moving, though, for the sake of this video. So even this white part in the paper here has value. I'm going to stick with that same technique I've been using. Now these lines here in this paper are white dashes. So I can use my eraser to try to erase those in, or I can kind of invert them and just draw them darker, even though they're meant to be light. That's okay. I'm going to switch to my 6B for just a minute here. I've got a table to draw, and I saved my 6B just for the table. It is the darkest and softest pencil, so it should smudge nice and easily create that nice dark area. You can sharpen these pencils in any kind of regular pencil sharpener. The 6B you'll need to sharpen often. So if they were short, I might have given you 2 of them. And the reason I have to color in some background here is so you can see the contrast of the bright white part of my paper. I'm doing this kind of quickly. It's a little messy, but it's just an example and it's just a practice. I am anticipating you spend a little bit more time and a little more effort on yours. All right, so again, I can use that blending tool to smudge this around if I want it to be a little smoother. In this case, I probably would want it to be smoother. It's a really dark surface, this table. And you can see I need some more pencil in here. I'm going to have to go back and fill in those white spots. So these blending tools don't really fix what you have there. They just kind of spread it around a little bit. So I still need to color really smoothly if I want something to be smooth. Okay, I've added some more value in here quickly. Now my table we talked about before I pause this is smooth. So this is where I'm going to use my blending tool and I'm going to try to flatten these values out and make them really smooth. Again, you have to have all the value there in the first place. This just flattens it, smooths it out. It's a little lighter here. There's kind of a highlight, but it's a smooth and gradual transition from dark to light. I can see that lighter circle, so I'm going to put it there. It's not going to be drastically different. If I've darkened it too much, I can take an eraser and lightly pick up some of that. and then go back and smooth it. Now I've got a lot of dark value on my paper, so I'm careful to keep my hand off of there. When I was adding the value in and coloring this background in, I would kind of rotate my paper around to keep my hand off to the side to help with less smudges. So that's a nice technique you might want to try. If you do have to keep your hand on top of a piece, you could always use a scrap piece of paper like this to set down here and to place your hand on to keep some of that smudging from happening. All right, so once I have my value in the roll of toilet paper that I like, and again, I'm only smoothing slightly to create that kind of speckled texture. I have some of that with the lines that are visible. But after I get my value close to where I want it, I'm going to actually go back with a harder pencil and put more of that in there. So I'm going to grab an HB. We'll see how that works. And you can actually see lines that go across here. So I'm going to make sure I have those cross-hatching lines visible everywhere to show that texture. I don't know if you can see it or not. I'll zoom in. There's a white spot here, like a scribble on my drawing. And that is because I had another piece of paper on top and I drew something on it and it made an indent in this paper. It's just a practice, so it's not a big deal here, but that's something you want to be aware of on your final. You never want to put another piece of paper on top of a drawing and write something. You never want to put this on top and do your grid and press down really hard because you'll make an indent in your paper underneath. All right, so I'm working on my cross-hatching lines here to create my texture. So the dots inside of this flower here, there's some that are light and some that are dark, and I'm going to have a hard time getting them precise. So I'm going to kind of generalize. It looks like the top half of some of these circles are dark and the bottom half is light. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw the top half of some of these circles. They're not exact because they don't need to be. If you're writing words that you want to read, yeah, you want to be more careful. But for something like this, you can generalize a little bit. The same with my words, actually. Some areas are dark and some are light. So I would slow down and spend some time getting the dark and the light correct in those spots. And I can try to use this eraser and get some of the highlights in there. So I'm going to do the same thing on this piece here. I'm going to use my blending tool to flatten this a little bit. I almost have too much value on it right now. I'm going to wipe some of that off in the corner and clean this off a little bit before I do this lightest area. And then I'm going to use my value scale to check to make sure I have my values right. Or if you don't have a value scale, what you can do is you can use your image. I'm going to hold this next to it to see if these two values correspond. They're pretty close. So you can see I still need to make this a little darker technically. But just like I did here, I'm going to go back and make sure I have these lines where I want them here. You can't really see the texture lines as much down here, so I'm going to do them a lot lighter. Here's a darker value here. It goes dark back to light, so I'm going to make sure I get a little bit darker value here on this edge. The top of the toilet paper here is a little darker, and then there's a white edge there, and that one's really important. So I did kind of generalize some of the things over here, but that white line is super important because that's how a viewer is going to read that this is unraveling. So I need to go back and erase that bright white edge in there. And that eraser mark is probably a little too wide, so now I'm going to go back with my pencil and be very careful when I sure up this detail. That's pretty important for making it look like it's moving down. All right, there's a lot more detail I could be adding in here. I'm going to smooth out my background. I'm going to put some more detail inside my flowers, but I think I have enough here for you to get an idea. So there's different pencil marks to create different textures. There's a couple of different tools you can use to flatten things and make them smooth. Erasers, blending tools, and then the value scale to check. Or if you don't have the value scale, you can pull your paper down like this to check to see if your values are accurate or close.